Welcome to Everything Life and Financial Freedom. We are your hosts, Linda and Jim McKissack. If you know our story, you know that we went from over $600,000 in debt to having financial freedom. We share some of the insights and practical tips that we've learned over the last 30 years for achieving financial freedom, building wealth, and building an extraordinary life. Let's get started with today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Financial Freedom. I'm Linda McKissack.
And I'm Jim McKissack.
Well, we're just everyday average people, Jim, that didn't wake up to be Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or anyone like that. But we did decide we wanted to have an extraordinary life. And so our goal on this podcast is to help other people who will want to have an extraordinary life. And so part of what we do is we feature people who can help us either deliver the message and get people to understand why it's important to build wealth and passive income and get those freedom and options. And one of the great stories that I had the great pleasure of interviewing on another podcast that's all about passive income is Mary Boccardo. So Mary, thank you for joining us today. And if you will kick us off and tell us a little bit about your background, because it's so relevant to what we're going to help people try to figure out today and understand.
Sure. And I appreciate you having me back on again. So I also just an average person. I started out my career as a registered dietitian out of college after a year-long internship. I was working in healthcare throughout my career. And then about in 2010, I went into long-term care and short-term rehab. So I did that for about 10 years. And throughout the course of doing that, working with people every day and attending meetings, which are, they're called interdisciplinary team meetings, where there's one representative from kind of every department. And as the registered dietitian, I was privy to these conversations with people who had entered into the short-term rehab side for one reason or another. Usually it was something small or sometimes something big. Once they were in there, they would find out that they weren't going to be able to leave because they weren't stable to be discharged home without some form of 24-hour care. And it always seemed to just kind of sneak up on these families. They weren't prepared, they weren't ready. And what would happen a lot of times is lose their entire fortune in having to live in a nursing home for the rest of their life. And they weren't prepared for that. So that was kind of where I started to realize I'm starting to see myself, reflecting in these people and not feeling like I was financially prepared to weather something like that myself. And I'm 20 years into my career. I have about 20 to 30 years left to go. And I didn't want to see myself in that same situation.
Wow. That's what we call the graduallys and suddenlies. And I don't think anybody's prepared for those, but you live long enough, you're going to experience at least one, maybe more.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we did have a lot of people who would just return and be back again and back again until finally they were on the long-term care side of things. And my facility was a beautiful facility, but unfortunately we could only have so many people who were able to be there with their own money, and it was, it's very frustrating and it's a very hard process to watch others go through.
Yeah. And it's kind of shocking how expensive, what I felt like I saw happen was people actually would wind up go in those nursing homes and stuff and have to pay more money than they actually paid for the house they lived in. I mean, those expenses.
Yeah, it's like the most expensive rent you'll ever have to pay. And it's at the end of your life, And
I don't think anybody tells you that for sure.
No, I mean, it's $10,000 a month usually of average.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's expensive.
So you had the wake up call. You saw yourself in those people. What was your plan to do something different at that point?
So I had always wanted to get my real estate license, but having small children and a full-time job, there really wasn't the kind of free time to join a real estate school. So it was actually during the pandemic that a lot of things changed. And one of the things was that a lot of real estate schools became online programs. And so I was able to do an online school over Zoom, which was something that I didn't have the opportunity to do before. And I was able to get the school done. And so it was great. I loved it. And then I became a realtor.
Why did you pick real estate?
I think I'd always wanted to become a realtor. I just didn't really know if it was something that I would be able to do. And I really took an interest in it when I bought my first house, when I realized I could buy a house. My daughter was like 10 months old at the time. And I think I was like, I don't know if I'm dating myself, but I like 27, 28 when I bought my first house. And I had no idea that I could afford a house. I had a job. I had a good, decent job as a dietitian. It wasn't great. The pay wasn't anything, amazing. But I had good credit, and it was just something that when I found out that I could purchase a home on my own, it was like a whole new world opened up. And then once I bought my first house, I just never stopped looking at houses. And I had a friend here in town when we moved from Syracuse, New York to Charlotte, North Carolina in 2014. And I had a friend who I would always bother with my real estate interests. I always just felt so bad asking her to go look at houses because I kind of knew that I was really just doing it for fun.
Yeah.
But it was like, if the house didn't have all the pictures, I would have to go look at it because I would need to see, I just need to know what's around this corner or what's, in this room over here. And then she was always really nice about it and would take me and let me, look at whatever houses I wanted with the hope that one day I would find an investment property of my own and eventually buy a house from her. But I went around it a little bit of a different way, but I did end up getting my real estate license. And then when I went to speak to her about it and tell her I had gotten my license, she told me about Keller Williams. And then I ended up choosing her to be my sponsor. So,
That's awesome.
So it worked out in the end.
Worked out for her in the end. So when did you, and when you got into real estate, did you know that you were going to eventually start buying investment properties also? Or what were you going to do differently than those people that you had been watching their lives unfold unprepared?
So I've always kind of had it in my mind that I would like to own 20 properties outright by the time I'm 65. Which I guess is kind of retirement age, although I don't really plan to retire when I'm 65. I'll probably keep working as long as I can. But I just have kind of always had that as my number in my head at like 20 homes, making passive income. I feel like I would be able to make enough in order to, if something did ever happen, that I would have the passive income to take care of myself and my husband, and not have to put that kind of a burden on our kids. So I became a realtor, and then it was definitely, I think, the right choice for me, because then I did end up, as soon as I became a realtor, I kind of signed up for everything, which is how I ended up on your podcast. I signed up for a lot of things at once. I get very excited, and I always feel like I need to get as much information as possible. And then as soon as I had my license, I kept checking, the MLS in my neighborhood just to see what was going up for sale and what things were going for. And I kept seeing this property that was not part of my neighborhood, but it was like directly behind it. And I eventually finally looked into it, and it ended up being a kind of an unusual property. It was a microgreens business that the people had built up from the beginning, from scratch, and had decided that they were done with it and they wanted to move to Tennessee so that they could go camping and start investing in their own properties in Tennessee.
Hello. Thank you for listening to the Everything Life and Financial Freedom podcast. For transcripts, resources, and more, visit the episode page on the podcast website at everythinglifeandfinancialfreedom.com. You can also download our Freedom Number worksheet. This worksheet will help you determine the amount of passive income you need to generate each year to sustain the lifestyle you have or the lifestyle you want when you no longer wish to work or simply want the freedom of your time and your money.
So I went to go look at it, and I met the owner. And she was just this really nice woman who had worked really hard to build up this business, and they were just selling it for the price of the property.
So you got a property and a business.
So it was 5-acre property. It has a wood-fired pizza oven, which is the only way that I was able to sell my husband on the deal. He doesn't like
you'll
any
have
of
some
my
microgreens to put on that pizza.
Yes, and we do. And it's a thriving, successful microgreens business. We ended up buying it. I paid her a consultant fee to train me on how to do it. And we said we would do it for a year on our own and then eventually hire people so that doesn't have to be what I do for the rest of my life, because I do want to keep doing real estate investments. But it's a family business. It's going to be what our kids, do in order to make money to pay for their college. And we have a pizza oven. We make pizza every weekend. Yeah. And we grow microgreens. It's mostly for restaurants, but they are extremely nutritious. So it kind of ties me back into my roots as a dietitian. And we grow microgreens for all of North Carolina. It's like a legit business.
So is it profitable?
it's profitable right away. And I happened to be taking a commercial real estate class at the time. So when I calculated the cap rate, I was like, this is insane. It was like 30. I was like,
Wow.
this is crazy. This is a
What a
huge opportunity.
What a
So
godsend.
we did it. Yeah. It really was. It was just amazing. It did end up taking me kind of out of my circle of, diving into real estate, but I'm still in it and I'm still looking and I'm still working towards, investing and all that stuff. This just happened to be kind of a little detour, but
What a neat opportunity.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's awesome. So I have two final questions for you before we close. Do you think any of the people that you had the aha with, did they have that realization? I should have done something different. Did they say, I wish I'd have done something different?
I did think on that. And it wasn't so much the people themselves as it was their family members who
had to do
it. And I think I think their aha in the whole thing, if anything was, it was just, we don't ask our parents how much money they make. I don't think anyone talks about it. No one talks about money. And I think that can really hold us back in a lot of ways throughout our lives when you don't really know how much you're supposed to be making or someone else is supposed to be making and how much you need. And you don't have those tough conversations. And there's no planning involved, then you can sometimes end up in a tough spot. And so hopefully it let them kind of look into their own finances and do some planning on their own for when this happens to them and possibly the next 10 to 20 years,
Yeah, so true. We call that, we did a study in our hold book and it said 54 of the 100 people they followed for 40 years were broke and dependent on their family. And we call this preparing for the unexpecteds because no one expects you to have to fund where your parents live and their kind of lifestyle that they get to have towards the very end. So last question, what advice would you give anyone that's listening to this podcast about building passive income and creating financial freedom?
I would say, never stop trying, never stop learning, and find something that you feel passionate about. For me, my passion was in real estate, but there are so many different ways that you can find, multiple income streams and passive streams of income. It can be anything that you're interested in. There's so many different ways to make money now, especially, online and marketing, all different kinds of things. But I would say just never stop trying. And one of my favorite Gary Keller quotes is, you can only fail if you quit.
Yeah.
So if there's something that you find interesting or you have a passion in, even if you can only do it in your free time or on the side, it's worth it to just keep trying. And it might take a while for you to get going, but just keep going.
Mary, what's so exciting about your story is for you to find an opportunity, not know anything a whole lot about that opportunity, but yet find a mentor that owned the business to get in there and train you, teach you the business, and then you buy it and take advantage of it.
That's cool.
I mean, that's what great investors do.
Yeah,
and seeing the opportunity really and then being willing to pull the plug and make it happen.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I have to say, I'm making more money doing this on the side than I ever made as a dietitian.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? And
congratulations.
And it also proves a point that there's always an opportunity out there. You got to be an opportunity seeker, someone who's always looking. And it comes in different sizes and packages and sometimes in overalls as work and all those things, but just be open that and this is one of our goals of this podcast, is show that there's lots of different ways to do this. And we always say that there's 3 ways to build wealth: real estate, stocks, and businesses. And so I love it.
She did real estate and businesses all in the
same deal.
And I learned that from you, Linda. I did. I learned about the business piece was something I had actually never really thought about. I knew real estate and I knew the stock market, but I never thought about businesses. And it's just kind of all happened and came all together.
That's awesome.
Really well for us. And and then my husband likes to say that it was, I can't believe we got so lucky. And I'm like, I am looking all the time. I'm constant. I mean, I give him about 1,000.
The harder you work, the luckier y'all get.
Exactly. I'm like, this was not luck. This was me looking for a very long time. And then finally finding something that you were interested in too.
Yeah.
So that was a hard combination.
Yeah. that is the hardest part sometimes. Well, I love this, Mary. Thank you so much for sharing. I know people are going to get a lot out of your story. And I think your whole past set you up for a great future. Everything you did, from being a dietitian to now into microgreens, to learning from other people's unfortunate experiences of not being prepared and not not being ready for life's unexpected. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and really, I'm just so excited about you having the investor mindset and being on the lookout for things and searching for opportunities. Awesome.
Do microgreens only grow in certain part of the country? Just curious.
No, they grow everywhere. That's the great thing about them. They're greenhouse grown, so it's a greenhouse. And they take 1 to 2 weeks, depending on what it is, to turn it around. And we grow them in trays, like a 10 by 20 inch tray, and soil grown. And then we cut them and put them in a box and take them over to Cisco.
Yeah, I see them
where they get distributed.
I see them in my grocery store. How long do they stay good? That's what I need to know, because I buy them. But
5 to 7 days, but they really can last up to 10 days, depending on if you've got to keep them really cold. They don't stay well if they're in and out of the fridge too many times, but
yeah, good to know. Well, I learned something about microgreens.
The healthiest things you can eat. They have 40
kidding.
times the nutritional value of the adult plant. So
there's something,
of them.
I think they're called not snow peas, but pea sprouts. Is that the same kind of thing? I use those for a smoothie, but I could use microgreens too. So I'm going to go buy some microgreens. They might be yours. I love it every time I hear it, and it just keeps getting better. So next time I interview you, I can't wait to hear what's happened next.
That is such a cool story.
I appreciate it. Like I said, I really do feel like a very average person. So I was surprised that you asked me to come back on.
Yeah, you're awesome. Well, hey, you know what? If people don't see themselves in our stories, they'll think we're different, and they can't do what we do. And that's not what we want. So if you have not, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And the greatest compliment you could give us is to pass this podcast along to any other average person who you think is looking to have an extraordinary life. And so, Mary, want to say thank you for your story and your journey. And Jim, I'll see you next time.
All right.
See you then. Thank
Wonderful.
you, Mary. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Nice
see you
to
soon.
see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening today. If you haven't already, please subscribe and share this podcast with others. The greatest compliment you can give us is to leave a 5-star review. And please feel free to reach out to us at info@lindamckissick.com. We would love to hear from you about any ideas, topics, or guests to include on our podcast. So see you next time.